I can't do this anymore, I whispered to the empty kitchen, my hand pressed against the cool granite counter as I tried to steady the tremble running through my body. The morning sun streamed through the blinds, casting stripes across the hardwood floor, but even the warmth couldn't reach the chill coiling in my chest. My name is Sarah Miller, 28, 8 months pregnant, and for the past hour I had been watching the surveillance footage I never should have found. Robert Blackwell, 65, my husband, stood there with someone else, a model, a woman half my age, laughter bubbling between them like it was a private joke I wasn't invited to. My stomach tightened, the baby's tiny kicks sharp and insistent, reminding me that I had someone to protect. I swallowed the lump in my throat and pulled on my cardigan, fingers brushing the edges of the envelope I had left on the dining table for him. I hadn't taken my car keys yet, hadn't even decided where to go, only that I couldn't stay in a house that had become a museum of betrayal. My phone buzzed once, then twice, Robert's name flashing across the screen, messages left unanswered. I didn't want confrontation, I wanted space, I wanted air, I wanted the silence that came when you vanish. The hallway felt too narrow, the walls closing in, and I felt the pull of the front door like a current dragging me toward freedom. Each step was deliberate, careful, as if walking quietly could erase the last hour's discoveries from reality. Outside, the city was alive, oblivious to my private collapse. The wind carried the scent of rain from the night before, faint and wet, brushing my cheek as I passed the row of parked cars. I glanced back once, the apartment window reflecting a woman I barely recognized in her own skin, eyes wide, cheeks flushed, heart hammering. My breath caught as I clutched the envelope tighter, words for him penned in ink I hoped would convey everything I couldn't say aloud, anger, disappointment, fear, love tangled with resignation. I walked faster, boots clicking against the concrete, past the cafe where we had shared our first date, past the corner where we had argued and laughed, all the landmarks now tainted with memory. No one called after me, the city swallowed me whole. I ducked into a small park, the benches still wet from morning dew, and sat on the cold metal, knees drawn to my chest. The baby kicked again, soft but insistent, grounding me, tethering me to the life I carried even as the life I had known fell apart. I unfolded the letter in my hands, rereading the words that were as much a shield as a goodbye. My fingers trembled, but I wrote with care, every sentence a breadcrumb of my heart. Robert would find it eventually. I wanted him to understand the gravity of choice, the weight of betrayal, and the impossible love that remained even when trust had crumbled. Around me, the city moved on, unaware of the quiet storm unfolding in a small corner of a vast metropolis. And for the first time since the footage, I felt the beginnings of resolve, a fragile determination that the next step, wherever it led, would be for me and for the child I carried, not for the man who had failed me. The morning moved with a slow, deliberate rhythm as Sarah Miller navigated the quiet streets, her hands resting lightly on the steering wheel of her compact car, eyes scanning for any familiar landmarks that could offer a sense of grounding. The city felt unusually still, the usual hum of traffic replaced by the occasional distant siren or the soft rustle of leaves along the sidewalks. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, every memory of Robert Blackwell, the man who had once promised protection and partnership, now interlaced with the ache of betrayal. She thought about the envelope she had left behind, the careful choice of words meant to convey her feelings without confrontation, a bridge between her pain and the reality she could not change. The baby moved again, subtle nudges that reminded her of the responsibility that stretched beyond herself, a life dependent on her clarity and resolve. As she drove past the small park where she had first felt him as a presence of power, she felt the contrast of her own fragility and the overwhelming force that Robert represented. The cityscape blurred outside her window, the early light casting long shadows that seemed to chase her along the avenue. She parked briefly by a quiet cafe, the smell of fresh coffee wafting through the air, grounding her in a moment of normalcy before she continued on her path. Her phone remained silent, no calls, no messages, a brief reprieve that allowed her to focus on the present, on the small decisions that mattered, where to go, how to breathe, how to remain safe. Her thoughts turned to the life she had envisioned, the simplicity she had hoped for in these final months of pregnancy, and the stark reality that she now had to navigate a world where trust had been fractured. She reminded herself that she was not alone in this journey, that even within the turbulence, there was a steady rhythm in the heartbeat she felt beneath her hand. She considered the options ahead, the places she could hide, the people she could rely upon, all while maintaining the careful balance between caution and courage. Each turn of the wheel, each glance at the street signs, reinforced her determination to move forward, to create a path that was defined not by the actions of another, but by her own choices. As she reached a familiar bridge spanning the river, the city spread out beneath her, a vast expanse of lights and movement, yet she felt an intimate connection to the quiet moments within it, a world contained within her car, her mind, and the life growing within her. The envelope pressed against her chest, a symbol of her voice and her agency, reminded her that while she could not undo what had happened, she could define what came next. She exhaled slowly, feeling the tension in her shoulders ease just slightly, and continued onward, one careful, deliberate mile at a time, each moment a step toward reclaiming control and finding clarity amidst the uncertainty. The afternoon sun filtered through the tall buildings as Sarah Miller navigated the quiet side streets of the city, her car moving at a measured pace, careful to avoid drawing attention. Every turn brought new reflections of herself in the storefront windows, a reminder of the woman she had been and the person she was becoming, defined by the choices she had made and the life she carried within her. The letter in her bag felt heavier with each passing mile, a silent witness to the storm of emotions she could not voice aloud. She thought about the small apartment she had left behind, the familiar hum of everyday life now tainted by the awareness of betrayal. Passing the old bookstore where she had met Robert Blackwell years ago, memories of laughter and late-night conversations seemed distant and unreal, almost like they belonged to someone else entirely. The streets grew quieter, the traffic a soft murmur beneath the occasional call of a bird or the rustle of leaves along the sidewalk. She pulled into a small parking lot behind a community center, the gravel crunching softly under her tires, and took a moment to breathe, letting her hand rest against her abdomen as the baby moved gently, a subtle reassurance amid the uncertainty. Her thoughts drifted to the future, the endless possibilities of what lay ahead, and the realization that she alone could shape the path forward. The envelope she had left behind symbolized more than goodbye, it was her voice, her agency, her declaration that even in the face of heartbreak, she would not be silenced. She stepped out of the car, the cool air brushing against her face, grounding her in the reality of the city that seemed both vast and intimate all at once. The community center loomed ahead, a place where she could find temporary refuge, a quiet corner to gather her thoughts and plan the next steps. Each footstep across the pavement echoed in her mind, a rhythm of determination that matched the steady beat of her heart and the life she carried within. She found a bench partially shaded by a row of trees, the dappled light creating patterns on the ground that shifted as the sun moved across the sky. Sitting down, she allowed herself a moment to close her eyes, to feel the movement of the baby, to acknowledge the fear and the resolve that coexisted within her. The city hummed around her, unaware of the silent journey unfolding in its midst, each passerby engrossed in their own lives, each sound a part of the soundtrack that accompanied her thoughts. She thought of Robert, of the power he wielded and the presence he commanded, and while a part of her still felt the sting of hurt and disbelief, another part recognized the necessity of distance and reflection. She opened her bag, retrieving a small notebook where she had begun to record observations, plans, and dreams, a tangible map of her intentions in a world that felt unpredictable and uncertain. The afternoon stretched on, the sun casting long shadows, and Sarah felt the steady pulse of determination grow within her, a commitment to herself and to the life she nurtured, a quiet, resilient assertion that no matter what challenges came, she would navigate them with clarity, care, and the unyielding strength of a mother protecting her child. The sky had shifted to a pale amber as the sun began its descent behind the skyscrapers, casting long, slender shadows across the quiet streets where Sarah Miller walked, her steps deliberate and measured. The city seemed to stretch endlessly around her, yet each familiar corner and storefront took on a new meaning, a reminder of the life she had left behind and the uncertainty that lay ahead. Her hand rested lightly on her abdomen, feeling the small movements of the baby within, each subtle kick a pulse of life that steadied her nerves and reminded her of the responsibility she carried. She paused for a moment on a quiet corner, the faint hum of distant traffic blending with the whispering breeze through the trees, and allowed herself a brief exhale, the tension in her shoulders easing just slightly. Her mind wandered to the letter she had left behind, the words chosen carefully, a bridge between the pain she felt and the life she intended to build on her own terms. She thought of Robert Blackwell, the man who had once represented security, partnership, and love, now transformed in her perception by betrayal, a reminder that even the strongest bonds could fracture. The evening air carried a soft chill, and she pulled her cardigan tighter, feeling the contrast of warmth against the cool wind as she continued down the path toward the community center, her chosen refuge for the night. Inside, the space was calm, a quiet haven amid the sprawling city, and she settled onto a bench near a Large window, the fading light filtering through and painting her in soft shades of gold and shadow. Sarah opened her bag and retrieved the small notebook she had brought along, flipping through the pages filled with observations, plans, and quiet reflections, each entry a tether to her resolve and clarity. She scribbled a few more thoughts, tracing the lines carefully, ensuring her intentions were clear, her priorities set, and her next steps considered with precision. The soft rustle of pages and the distant echo of footsteps outside became a rhythm, a reminder of the ongoing flow of life beyond her immediate world. Her gaze drifted to the city skyline, the mixture of light and shadow reflecting the duality of her own emotions, grief and determination, fear and courage, uncertainty and resolve. Each passing moment seemed to reinforce her commitment to herself and the child she carried, the awareness that she could shape her own path and navigate the challenges that came without yielding to despair. She thought of the people she could trust, the safe spaces she could access, and the small, deliberate steps she could take to ensure both her security and the preservation of her autonomy. The city moved on around her, indifferent to the private narrative unfolding within its streets, yet every sound, every shift of light, and every subtle movement became a part of the backdrop to her careful planning. Sarah closed her notebook, tucked it securely back into her bag, and rose from the bench, feeling the steady beat of her heart and the presence of life within her as a quiet source of strength. The streets stretched before her, each block a chance to reclaim control and find direction, and she moved forward with a cautious yet determined pace, embracing the sense of purpose that had begun to grow within her, a silent affirmation that she would face the days ahead with clarity, resilience, and unwavering attention to the life she now carried. The city lights began to flicker on, one by one, as the evening deepened into a soft, dusky glow that wrapped the streets in a warm, subdued light. Sarah Miller walked along the quiet sidewalk, her coat wrapped tightly around her. Hands resting gently on her rounded belly, each step measured, deliberate, a rhythm of purpose and caution. The envelope in her bag, the words she had written just hours earlier, pressed against her side like a silent companion, a reminder of the choices she had made and the life she was determined to protect. She passed the small bakery she had once stopped at on rainy mornings, the smell of fresh bread wafting through the air, stirring memories of a time when mornings had been simple, untainted by distrust or betrayal. Her mind wandered to Robert Blackwell, the man she had shared her life with, whose presence had once been a source of comfort and security, now transformed into an abstract weight she carried silently, knowing that understanding and closure were paths she had to navigate alone for the moment. The streets stretched before her, empty but alive with the distant sounds of the city, the soft hum of a bus engine, the faint chatter of a pedestrian passing by, the rhythmic click of her own boots against the pavement. She found a small public garden tucked between two buildings, the benches empty, the trees swaying gently in the evening breeze, their leaves rustling like whispered advice. Sarah lowered herself onto one of the benches, feeling the cool metal beneath her palms, and allowed herself a moment to breathe, to feel the life within her, each movement a grounding force amidst the swirling uncertainty. She pulled her bag onto her lap, fingers tracing the edges of the notebook where she had begun to map out plans, observations, and reflections, each note a careful step in reclaiming autonomy and clarity. The sky above shifted from amber to soft violet, the last traces of sunlight fading behind the skyline, and she let the calm settle around her, absorbing the quiet, the gentle cadence of the city winding down. Her thoughts turned again to the baby, the tiny life dependent on her, and the awareness that every choice, every cautious movement, and every moment of stillness was part of building a safe space, a future grounded in determination and careful decision-making. A distant church bell chimed the hour, the sound echoing softly, marking time and reminding her that the world continued beyond her immediate troubles, that life moved forward even when uncertainty and heartache loomed. She opened her notebook once more, jotting down details, potential safe routes, and thoughts about trusted friends who could offer guidance or shelter, each word a tether to the practical, the necessary, the actionable. The cool evening air brushed her face, bringing clarity and focus, and she inhaled deeply, letting the rhythm of her breathing sync with the faint movements of the baby, a quiet partnership of resilience. As darkness settled over the city, she rose from the bench, the notebook safely tucked back into her bag, and continued along the pathway that would lead her to temporary refuge, each careful step a reaffirmation of agency, strength, and the unwavering commitment to protect both herself and the new life she carried. The night settled over the city like a soft velvet curtain, the glow of streetlights reflecting off the wet pavement as Sarah Miller continued her careful journey through quiet neighborhoods, each turn and intersection a test of her awareness and resolve. She adjusted the strap of her bag across her shoulder, feeling the gentle weight of the notebook and the envelope inside, their presence a reminder of the life she had chosen to step into, a life guided by cautious determination. The baby moved again, small but insistent, a pulse of reassurance that she was not alone, that there was purpose to each measured step she took. Sarah passed a small diner, the neon sign flickering softly, and the smell of fresh coffee and baked goods drifted into the night air, stirring faint memories of mornings filled with warmth and laughter before trust had been fractured. She kept walking, her eyes scanning the streets for familiar faces, friendly lights in windows, any sign of safety, while remaining alert to the shadows that seemed to linger in corners, a subtle reminder that the city held unknowns she could not ignore. The envelope pressed lightly against her side, the words inside carefully chosen, symbolizing both farewell and assertion, a voice that could speak when her own could not. Her mind wandered briefly to Robert Blackwell, and the mix of anger, disbelief, and lingering care that she still felt, a complex knot of emotions that refused to be untangled easily, even as she focused on the present and the steps necessary to safeguard herself and the child she carried. She found a small bench beneath a lamppost in a quiet park, the light casting a circle of warmth on the cold pavement, and she lowered herself onto it, taking a slow, deliberate breath as she allowed herself a moment of reflection. The distant hum of the city seemed to fade, replaced by the rhythm of her own heartbeat and the subtle movements of the baby, grounding her in the reality of life she was determined to nurture. Sarah retrieved her notebook, flipping through pages filled with careful observations, plans, and reflections, each line a map of her intentions, a guide through the uncertainty of the coming days. The evening air was cool, carrying the scent of nearby trees and distant rain, and she let the quiet settle around her, a companion to the steadying rhythm within her. She made notes on potential places to seek temporary refuge, contacts she could trust, and steps to maintain both security and autonomy, each mark of her pen reinforcing the control she could exercise over her own path. The lamppost cast long shadows, and the faint rustle of leaves above her added a gentle cadence to the night, a reminder of the small but significant details she had to attend to. Rising from the bench, she adjusted her coat, feeling the cool night air brush against her face, and continued along the path that led away from familiar streets, embracing the resolve that had been quietly growing within her. Every step was deliberate, every glance purposeful, a reaffirmation that while the city moved on around her, she was charting a course defined by her own courage, careful planning, and unwavering commitment to the life she carried and the future she intended to protect. The night deepened, and the streets glimmered under the soft glow of streetlights as Sarah Miller made her way toward the small riverside park she had discovered earlier. The gentle lapping of water against the concrete embankment offered a strange comfort, a quiet rhythm to match the steady beat of her own heart and the subtle movements of the baby she carried. Each step felt deliberate, as if moving slowly through the city could keep her invisible from the watchful eyes she imagined might be searching for her. She found an empty bench near the water, its cold metal frame grounding her in the moment as she sat and exhaled, the crisp evening air brushing against her cheeks. Pulling her coat tighter around her, she reached for the notebook in her bag, flipping through pages filled with reflections, plans, and sketches of the routes she could take if she needed to move again. The city around her seemed vast yet intimate, each distant sound, the hum of a bus, the faint murmur of pedestrians, the distant bark of a dog adding layers to the night that both comforted and reminded her of the world continuing beyond her current concerns. Sarah thought about the life she was nurturing, the responsibility that made every choice feel weighty, every action deliberate, and every moment of stillness precious. The envelope in her bag, carefully written and folded, represented her voice, her decision, and the boundary she had drawn between herself and the past that had become a shadow of disappointment and hurt. The reflections brought a clarity that steadied her breathing, a rhythm synchronized with the subtle kicks and movements from within, reminding her of the bond and trust she was building with the new life she would soon meet. She allowed herself to look out across the water, the soft light reflecting in gentle ripples, creating patterns that shifted with the breeze, a quiet metaphor for the fluid, unpredictable path she was navigating. Sarah opened her notebook again, making careful notes, reviewing potential safe locations, contacts she could rely on, and the practical steps she could take to ensure both her safety and autonomy. The wind carried the distant scents of the city, baked bread, coffee from late-night shops, the faint green of trees along the riverbank, and for a moment she allowed herself to imagine a future where mornings were calm, spaces were secure, and trust could be rebuilt carefully. Cautiously. Her thoughts drifted briefly to Robert Blackwell, the man who had been both comfort and complexity, whose presence still lingered in memory, and while a part of her ached, another part embraced the resolve to move forward independently, with prudence and intention. The night air cooled further, brushing softly against her hands and face, and she rose from the bench, feeling the gentle determination that had been growing within her, a steadying force that guided each step. She continued along the riverside path, careful and measured, aware of the life inside her, the choices she had made, and the unfolding possibility that with each deliberate movement, she was reclaiming control, charting a path of strength, resilience, and unwavering care for herself and the child she carried. The city had become a quiet companion as Sarah Miller walked through the dimly lit streets, the soft glow of lampposts casting elongated shadows that stretched across the pavement, marking the passage of time and distance from the life she had temporarily left behind. Her steps were careful, deliberate, each one measured against the uncertainty of the path ahead, yet she felt a growing steadiness within, a rhythm aligned with the life she carried. The baby moved gently, subtle reminders that her choices had weight beyond her own, that each step was a deliberate act of protection and intention. She paused briefly by a small fountain in a secluded courtyard, the sound of water trickling over stone soothing her frayed nerves and offering a momentary sense of serenity. Sarah adjusted the strap of her bag across her shoulder, fingers brushing the envelope she had left behind earlier, a silent testament to the decisions she had made, the boundaries she had drawn, and the voice she refused to lose. The notebook in her lap opened easily, and she revisited her notes, refining her plans, sketching potential routes, and reviewing the steps she would take to maintain both safety and autonomy in the days to come. Around her, the city breathed in muted tones, the distant rumble of a delivery truck, the faint chatter of a couple walking nearby, the rustle of leaves stirred by the evening breeze, and each sound, while ordinary, felt amplified against the quiet of her internal world. She considered the people she could trust, the places that might offer temporary refuge, and the resources she had at her disposal, carefully weighing each option with the steady awareness that her actions had consequences for two lives now intertwined. The evening air carried a crispness that brushed softly against her face, and Sarah drew a deep breath, feeling the rise and fall of her chest, the gentle movements of the baby beneath, and the clarity that came from focus and intention. She traced the paths she had traveled earlier, noting landmarks, lighted areas, and streets less traveled, each observation a layer of preparation in a landscape filled with uncertainty. The quiet of the courtyard allowed her to reflect, to acknowledge both fear and resolve, and to embrace the growing strength that had been quietly building over the past hours. She thought briefly of Robert Blackwell, the man whose presence had shaped so much of her past, and while a twinge of grief surfaced, it was tempered by the certainty that she was acting in the best interest of the life she carried. Rising from the bench, she tucked her notebook securely into her bag, adjusted her coat against the chill, and resumed her careful journey along the riverwalk, the lights reflecting softly on the water beside her. Each step was intentional, each movement a claim of agency, and with each passing moment, Sarah felt a quiet affirmation of her resilience, her independence, and her unwavering commitment to the safety and well-being of the life within her, a steady resolve that would guide her through the unfolding night and the uncertain dawn beyond. The first hints of dawn began to touch the horizon as Sarah Miller moved carefully through the quiet streets, the city wrapped in the soft glow of early morning light that painted buildings and sidewalks in gentle shades of gold and gray. Each step was measured, a deliberate rhythm that matched the steady beat of her heart and the subtle movements of the baby she carried, a constant reminder of the life she was determined to protect. The envelope and notebook she carried pressed lightly against her side, tangible symbols of the decisions she had made and the path she had chosen to follow. She paused briefly on a small bridge overlooking the river, the water glinting softly in the emerging light, and took a deep breath, inhaling the cool air and letting it fill her lungs, a moment of stillness before the day began in earnest. Her mind drifted through the events of the past hours and nights, each memory a layer of learning, reflection, and careful consideration of the steps she had taken to reclaim her autonomy and ensure safety for herself and the child she nurtured. The city around her stirred gradually, a distant bus engine, the low hum of traffic, the soft footsteps of early risers echoing against the pavements, yet all of it felt secondary to the focused, deliberate awareness she maintained of her surroundings. Sarah glanced down at the envelope in her hand, the words inside a quiet testament to her voice, a bridge between the past and the life she intended to lead on her own terms, and she felt a surge of resolve, a commitment to act in accordance with her convictions. She adjusted her coat against the cool morning breeze and continued along the path that led to the community center where she planned to take temporary refuge, each step carrying her further from the familiar yet fractured space she had left behind. The river beside her reflected the pale light of dawn in rippling patterns, each wave a reminder that life was fluid, unpredictable, yet capable of steady progress with careful attention. Her thoughts remained tethered to the practicalities ahead, safe routes, trusted contacts, and maintaining the delicate balance between caution and action while also honoring the emotional landscape she had traversed, the grief and determination intertwined in her reflections. Sarah paused to look at the skyline, the tall buildings catching the first light, a symbol of the world continuing onward, and she felt a quiet reassurance in the continuity, a sense that the day held possibilities even amid uncertainty. She allowed herself a brief pause, resting a hand on her abdomen as the baby moved gently, feeling the connection and the responsibility, a reminder that her choices were guiding more than just her own path. Rising again, she continued with cautious purpose, navigating streets bathed in the soft glow of dawn, aware of each detail, each sound, each step as part of a careful strategy to move forward. The city awoke slowly around her, and in the quiet determination of her morning journey, Sarah felt a strengthening of resolve, a clear recognition that she had the capacity to shape her own course and protect the life she carried, moving steadily into the unfolding day with resilience, focus, and unwavering care.